Pfizer. In July, the Trump administration, as part of Operation Warp Speed, agreed to provide Pfizer dollars to manufacture this vaccine pursuing a highly divisive impeachment endeavor as this president, the Trump administration,
and we are bringing you a live fact check. The White House press briefing has already there were in fact publicly bragged about the fact that he withheld
we provided $200 for eventual distribution. Technicians to administer the vaccine. On October 30th, we announced that McKesson Corporation will provide ancillary
which is an unimaginable scenario. 2 million people would die, but the U.S. has suffered more deaths than any other nation and has one of the highest rates of death per capita.
Pathway or strategy to overturn what the campaign believes is a flawed election. Are we talking about a judicial pathway? Are we talking about a legislative pathway? And a follow-up, how soon might Americans be able to get their hands on a COVID vaccine?
Yes, so your first point, I would say this, there's been multiple pieces of litigation filed across the country by various individuals, the campaign and others. I will leave it to the campaign to make those determinations.
Regarding the lawsuits that have been filed, so far the Trump campaign has lost all but 2 out of 31 lawsuits. The Trump campaign has been unable to present any evidence of the widespread voter fraud that they claim has happened. And in fact, as has been well documented, the head of security under DHS says that this is believed to be one of the most secure elections ever in U.S. history. He was promptly fired after saying that.
Is there a concern inside the White House that a lack of working with a potential or presumptive President-elect Biden team will somehow slow down the distribution of the COVID vaccine?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. It's an important one, and not in the slightest, because in fact I did hear the former vice president say yesterday he was concerned about not being able to distribute a vaccine. He shouldn't be. Maybe he hasn't seen, but we have publicly available that plan that I mentioned in my opening. It's the vaccination program, the interim playbook for jurisdiction operations. This is publicly available to read through it. Beyond that, I would say that we've already, going back months, partnered with the 64
A member of Biden's advisory team has said that a failure to coordinate the transition will cost tens of thousands of lives. More than 1,000 Americans are dying every day, and this lame duck administration is refusing to provide access to the incoming administration to help them be prepared to confront this crisis.
That voted for this president. That's more votes than any president has gotten in history. It's really extraordinary, and there are very real claims out there that the campaign is pursuing. 234 pages of affidavits publicly available in one county alone, that's Wayne County, and 2 individuals on the canvassing board there that have declined to certify. So these are real claims.
These are not real claims. I cannot emphasize this strongly enough. Widespread voter fraud is virtually non-existent. It has never existed on the scale that this administration is claiming. And this administration has provided no evidence that this year is any different. And I again want to highlight the statement from the head of election security within DHS, calling it, saying that this was the most secure election in American history, and saying, quote, "There is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or in any way was compromised."
Statement encouraging the Trump administration, in the absence of ascertainment, to begin allowing the Biden team full access to everything they need for a transition, access to agencies, access to real-time data. What's the harm in doing that?
So there's a Presidential Transition Act that determines exactly what an administration needs to do in advance of an election, and we have done everything statutorily required, and we will continue to do that.
It's after the election now.
Thank you. I have a question first, a follow-up.
So this is not true. Actually, when there is an apparent winner, that winner, and there indeed is an apparent winner, that winner is supposed to have access to funds and information to facilitate the transition. And even if this election were in doubt, which, for the record, it is not, even if this election were in doubt, given that there is a crisis that is killing over 1,000 Americans a day, the responsible thing to do would be to work hand in hand with a potential incoming administration.
Explain what went wrong.
Look, I would say the initial projection that our doctors gave us was 2 million people.
That is not true. Kayleigh McEnany is falsely claiming that the initial projection was that 2 million people would die. That is false. That is a projection based on a model that came out of the UK, which predicted what would happen if no action of any kind was taken, if there was no remediation. That is not actually time that over 100,000. We are now over 250,000. To pretend that we expected it to be higher than this is simply false.
Just this week, for example, yesterday, Vice President Pence wanted to make clear that they supported state and local decision-making. Just 2 days ago, you called some of those state guidelines Orwellian. So how do you expect people to know what to do with all this mixed messaging?
Well, 2 things can happen at once, and it's this: taking COVID seriously, engaging in aggressive mitigation, but also recognizing that the American people have certain freedoms. And it is, by definition, Orwellian for a state like Oregon to say, if you have more than 6 people in your family congregate in your home, we can jail you for 30 days. That's not the American way. The American people know the CDC recommendations, know the guidelines. We've been talking about this for 10 months, but the American people still have certain freedoms, still have autonomy, and still can make important self-responsibility decisions.
It simply is not true that this administration has been sending a clear message on guidelines. President Trump has routinely dismissed the guidelines that his own CDC is putting forward. The very day that the CDC called on all Americans to wear masks, he announced that he would not. He has claimed credit for lives that have been saved by lockdown measures while attacking Democratic governors who instituted lockdown measures.
Did you all have a reaction to that when you saw that and read about it?
Again, that would be a question for the campaign. We at the White House are aggressively working on COVID, winding down the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, among other issues. There will be a drug pricing announcement later in the afternoon as well.
Okay, listen.
The press secretary is saying that the White House is aggressively working on COVID. It has been reported that the president has not met with his COVID task force for weeks.
His parole conditions are set to expire tomorrow. Is the president willing to commute his parole conditions or pardon him if the DOJ extends Pollard's parole? Have you been getting any calls from the Jewish and pro-Israel community to take action on this case?
I haven't heard about that. I haven't looked into the particular case, but if he shoots me an email, we'll take a look at his question.
Thank you.
Yes.
So back to the topic of concession, like we said earlier, is there something that the president needs to see before making that call? Is it the end of these lawsuits, whenever they do wrap up, all of them, states certifying results or different counties, or December 14th when the Electoral College casts its ballots?
Look, the president, again, is pursuing ongoing litigation, taking it day by day, and we'll wait for that litigation to play out.
So just to clarify, it's the end of that litigation that we would need to see before getting a call?
There's an entire constitutional process of electors casting their ballots, and I will leave that to the president. Yes. Chanel.
Thank you, Kayleigh. Contrary to the court of media opinion, there is real-time data showing vast irregularities in...
This is a question from conspiracy theory fringe news outlet OAN.
I ask this of you now, the White House. Where is our FBI in this entire scheme? Are they looking at any of the evidence that this White House or the campaign have presented in terms of real-time data evidence of voter irregularity?
There is no evidence. I cannot stress this enough. There is no evidence, none, zero, no evidence at all in existence of any significant voter fraud in this election. There have been individual instances of voter fraud. For instance, a Trump supporter in Pennsylvania tried to cast a ballot for his dead mother, but there is no widespread voter fraud. It is simply not a topic for debate. Election officials of both parties in all 50 states have confirmed this.
Remembering that this president was never given an orderly transition of power. His presidency was never accepted.
That is simply not true. Kayleigh McEnany is saying that there was no peaceful transition of power. That is, I hate using the term, but that is an outright lie. On this date, 4 years ago, already President-elect Trump had met with President Obama in the White House. There were extensive communications. The day after the election, Hillary Clinton, the winner of the popular vote, someone with actually a much greater claim at it being a narrow election than this president has, she immediately conceded and called on all Americans to support, not necessarily the policies, but to wish for the success of the incoming president. It is simply an outright lie to say that this administration was not afforded a due transition to govern. I will furthermore note that this administration took office.
Investigation, which searched for collusion, found none, and exonerated President Trump. While in 2016, President Trump became the duly elected...
It is a lie to say that the Russia investigation exonerated President Trump. The Mueller report explicitly said that it did not exonerate him. It is a lie to say that it proved that there was no collusion. Robert Mueller said in the report that he was not specifically looking at the issue of collusion because that is not a legal term, but he detailed numerous acts of cooperation that the White House and the President of the United States are lying to the American people. And I am deeply chilled that the President of the United States appears to be seeking to overturn the results of a decisive election. I just want to run a couple things by you before I sign off. There is no evidence of voter fraud. There is never evidence of widespread voter fraud. A comprehensive Loyola study found that over a period of over a decade, during which over 1 billion ballots were cast, they were only able to identify 31 instances of voter fraud. The Brennan Center for Justice has placed the risk of voter impersonation at approximately 0.00007. Widespread voter fraud simply doesn't exist. Now, Rudy Giuliani and the president's team have been trying to take advantage of things that they think they can convince you look suspicious. And I'd like to just point out why some of these things are not suspicious. One of the things that they say is that it is suspicious that Joe Biden did so much better in areas that are run by Democrats. Another word for areas that are run by Democrats is areas where more people tend to vote Democratic. It is, by definition, not surprising that in areas to vote Democratic, more people tend to vote Democratic. The team has been trying to say that it's suspicious how large batches of votes for Biden are suddenly found. They aren't found. No one has been finding large batches of ballots. They have been counting large batches of ballots. Ballots are counted in precincts. Democrats tend to live in more densely populated precincts. Cities tend to be Democratic. Rural areas tend to be more conservative, more Republican. So an example I've used before is Liberty County, Florida. There are 2,000 voters there, roughly. It doesn't take as much time to count the 2,000 votes in Liberty County, Florida, as it takes to count the roughly 2 million votes in Broward County, Florida. It's not surprising that the larger batch of votes took longer to count. And when they say this batch of votes suddenly came in, the votes didn't suddenly come in. The votes came in one by one over time. But when that precinct finished its count, it submitted its full count. Also, it is not surprising that it took longer to count the Democratic votes, because voting by mail has not traditionally favored one party over the other. But this year, President Trump repeatedly attacked the process of voting by mail and suggested it was fraudulent. And as a result, the vast majority of Trump voters were expected to vote in person on Election Day, whereas it was estimated that about 70% of Biden voters would cast their votes by mail. Mail-in votes take longer to count. You have to open the envelopes. You have to pull them out. You have to verify the signatures. A lot of them are barcoded. They have to be hand-scanned. It takes longer. And in many, many states, no matter when the votes were received, they can't be counted, and the envelopes can't even be opened until Election Day. So on Election Day, the people who showed up that day, their votes were counted instantly. But the mail-in ballots took a little bit longer, as everyone knew that they would. It's not surprising. But the administration has been trying to make that sound suspicious. Why did these Democratic votes come in so much later? Because you wouldn't let them be counted earlier. That's why. Republican legislatures created the situation that they then said was suspicious because it existed. That's some of what's going on. I'm sure I have not answered all your questions. If you want to tweet questions at me at apiper13, I will attempt to answer more. I would just urge everyone not to be swayed by wild, weird conspiracy theories. Widespread voter fraud does not exist. It is like Bigfoot. There are people who believe in it very strongly, but no one has ever presented convincing evidence. And certainly Rudy Giuliani has not presented any convincing evidence during his meltdown press conference yesterday. That's it for now. The last thing I'll leave you with is COVID-19 is rapidly surging throughout the nation. I know it is very tempting to travel and go be with your relatives now. I urge you not to do that. I urge you to honor your family members by staying away from them if you are not already living with them. And wherever you are, please wear a mask when you go out. Please wash your hands. Please do the things that you need to do to take care of yourself, to take care of your family, and to take care of your community. For NowThis, I am Alan Piper. I had the support of many people in our newsroom today, specifically Shelby Vaculin, Versha Sharma, Christina Koka, and Alex Rabinowitz. Please, stay safe. We are going to get through this together. I'm Alan Piper. Thank you for tuning in.